I have to ask you about the name of your company, Hoya,
Uh-huh.
because I only know this word in reference to the Georgetown
Yeah,
Hoyas.
me too. That's what I was thinking.
And I think I don't think there's a clear origin story for at least the Georgetown Hoyas.
Well, there's a clear origin story for Hoya in the way that we use it.
Okay.
Our chairperson is from the Hopi tribe in Arizona, and Hoya is the
Mm.
Hopi word for ready to fly off next.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
Yeah.
already we have like an insight.
Okay, good.
Wow.
Okay, yeah, okay. All right, we're going. Keller, we're bad at introducing people and not getting into long conversations about tangents of exactly the kind of thing that just happened. Would you be willing to quickly introduce yourself, but then we got to go straight to like what willing to fly off next means?
Okay. I am Keller Hayes. I'm director of the Transportation and Construction Girl program that is done by the Hoya Foundation. So there's my short intro.
Transportation and construction girl.
Yes.
Okay, so now two things. So what is ready to fly off? Is it like flying, leaving the nest, or
So the Hopi tribe has dances that they welcome in the new seasons. They give gratitude for the harvest. And one of the things is about ready to fly off next. So that's about going to the next and really progressing.
why don't we have a word for that? That's one word for that concept.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you know much about the like the Hopi people, the Hopi traditions? Do you feel like that's a very future-oriented tribe?
It is, that would be a separate podcast with our chairperson who is from the tribe, so I won't say that I can truly speak for them. Um, but I would say that it is a tribe that is completely steeped in tradition, that made plans and has looked towards the future for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Seems like that would be we could learn a lot about.
One of my
Totally.
prized possessions that I got 35 years ago is one of the Hopi figures. Uh,
Kachina.
Huh?
Kachina.
Kachina, thank you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
And it pretty much boiled down to the one that I could afford. I mean, I went up into the mesas. So
Hmm.
please correct me if I'm wrong, but as
Nope,
I
that is
remember it,
correct. Yes.
as you drive from New Mexico into Arizona, there's a series of mesas that you can
Yep.
climb up into, and then there's a village up there
Yes.
and a Hopi village. And
Yes.
so I went up there and I loved these. I guess they're representations of Hopi spirits, deities.
So the Hopi dances that I was talking about, in order to be able to do those dances, you have to get into the Kachina Society. And then they have these beautiful costumes that they wear for each dance. And it is truly a beautiful thing to see, because it's very rooted in their tradition, and it like I said, each of them has a very specific reason for that dance. And they have passed this tradition on, and then they give gifts to both the children and the elders. I mean, it's a very sacred, moving experience. And they have those dances with the Kachinas from January through August.
Oh,
And to
really?
get into
Okay.
the Kachina Society is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to go back there. I split my time between Virginia and Texas. I'm in Texas now.
Hmm.
So I'm a 10-hour drive from Santa Fe, basically,
Yeah.
in from the San Antonio area. And I went to high school in El Paso, Texas. So
Okay.
I have a Southwest
Hmm.
background. And Although I always hasten to add I'm Puerto Rican, so because people will just assume, oh well, whatever, but I'm not that at all. I'm Caribbean, you know.
Uh,
So, but I just loved visiting all of the fantastic indigenous people communities that have managed to survive
mhm.
Yeah.
in northern Arizona and northern New Mexico.
There are several villages that you mentioned on the Hopi reservation, and one of them is Wallopy, and it is still the way that it was. It still doesn't,
Oh,
this one small village still doesn't have indoor plumbing. They do everything. I mean, it's really remarkable.
so they never got kicked out of that land.
They are the one tribe that never
Wow.
did. Yeah.
That's
Not,
powerful.
not the best land in the world.
No, but there's a reason they didn't get kicked out of the land, but it's their land.
You know, though, it's incredibly interesting to drive around because it's like you look at the land and you're like, oh, well, this is, yeah, rocks and desert. And then you look at how they plant their corn. And, oftentimes we'll drive by a cornfield. Here's the big square cornfield with all the irrigation. And their cornfields very specifically follow where they know there will be water. And so it
Right, of
may be
course.
like 3 rows going in a little circle and then an S and that's how they grow it. And it grows. Yeah.
Yeah. The other, you're inspiring me. I actually do want to take that road trip all the way to California.
Mm,
Because I've never really done Utah, which
it's
is,
beautiful.
I've been told is, I mean, other than the Grand
Is that
Canyon.
where Bryce Canyon is?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I actually want to do that trip. So you've inspired me to really plan it out because I love it. And one of the things Julia loves time travel, accuses me of being a time traveler. I am not. But when you drive from New Mexico to Arizona through the Hopi and Navajo lands, is it Navajos up
Yep.
there? Yeah.
Yep.
Uh, During the summer, because Arizona doesn't go to daylight savings time,
Right.
the hour can be anywhere within a 2.5 hour range because
True.
New Mexico is in mountain time.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Arizona is in Pacific time, but if
But
particular,
Tucson or something, or the airport
they're
is
not.
it?
No, all of Arizona stays in,
Oh, do they? Okay.
doesn't
Yeah.
switch, but then the indigenous lands will have their own time. And you'll go, well, what time is it? And they'll say whatever, and you'll go, okay, so it's like a watch is useless for that time because
That's
you
so
don't
cool.
really know.
Which many of the indigenous peoples would say that a watch is useless, period.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. Good ideas. And now, what is it? Girl transportation? No, transportation and
Transportation and
construction.
construction girl. Yeah.
So your interest is in promoting careers in these fields for women?
Yeah, tell
Yeah.
us about your passion.
So, I was incredibly fortunate when I was in college to be put in a philosophy honors class, which I grew up in the middle of the country. I didn't even know what that meant, okay? Had no idea. And got into this class, and this amazing woman walked into the room, and I was like, wow. And I got to take that class. And then I really have supported women's issues since then. And I met one of the really, I would say, truly our mother in Nebraska, where I was at the time, who she met this young, firebrand feminist. I'm like, oh, wow. And she says, Keller, you will know you are truly a feminist when you have become a humanist.
Oh,
Wow. Brilliant.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Took me a while to understand how brilliant, but yes.
wow.
So I have been involved in women's issues for a lifetime. I was the president of the Colorado Women's Chamber for several years here. And I noticed that when women start a company, there's a lot of support. Once you've had that company going for a couple of years, hope you're doing great, but not so much support anymore.
Yeah.
So I started coaching women-owned businesses, and then I took like this strange turn into construction, which in fact, after living on a ranch, I finally realized my father was an electrician and a plumber and a heavy equipment operator and a roofer, all of these things that I didn't really realize at the time. And so I started coaching small business owners in transportation and construction. And we started Transportation and Construction Girl in 2016 because we looked around and said, okay, I have a passion in this area. We can see that there's a workforce shortage in this industry. And as we have individuals, there were 2 years in a row that we had 20% of the construction workforce retiring. So it was
Wow.
leaving this big gap. And at the same time, we noticed that only at that time 8%, now it's already all the way up to 11.7%. I'll take any advance. um, but that's all the percentage of women was in the industry. I'm
This
like,
is nationwide or in
it
Colorado?
was nationwide at the time. Yeah. Um, and we said, well, here's a good way we could put this together, as well as at the same time, women were making, now it's 82 cents, but at the time it was even less than that, on the dollar for men in comparable work, right? In construction, they're making 99 cents on the dollar.
Oh,
Oh, a
Oh,
few
wow.
cents. Who cares, right? Oh my goodness. Over a woman's lifetime earning, that difference could add up to 400,000 to 1.2 million, depending on her ethnicity.
right.
Wow. So we started this program and said, okay, our goal is not to do the training, because I will say one of the things about this industry, we have fabulous training. You can start right out of high school and get on the job training, which in this industry is pretty serious.
So
You
it's like an
can,
apprenticeship model?
no,
No?
they also have apprenticeships, which is a different model, but it's in the industry as well. You can also, we have these amazing VOTEC schools that you can go through them. You can get a certificate in, say, welding. You can get your associate's degree at the same time you get your high school diploma.
Hmm.
Wow.
Fantastic, right.
Or you can go to a 2-year, 4-year college. We have one amazing woman who went through our program that this still gives me goosebumps because she loved rocks. All of her friends were playing with dolls, and she said, "But I'm fascinated with rocks." She went to a rock museum, and somebody said, "Do you know you could have a career in it?" She said, "What?" And she now is on a 4-year scholarship to the Colorado School of Mines. And her goal is to be a geologist, and her goal is to be a geologist on Mars.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, if we can just get young women to dream big, I'm
What
happy.
a that gives me chills. What a
me
Doesn't it?
too.
fantastic goal to
Yes.
have.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm going to be a geologist on Mars.
I know. It's like,
You have anything to say
you have a
about that?
vision. Yeah. What, I mean, now talk about next to fly, well, to fly off next, right? I mean,
Exactly.
it's like planning
Exactly.
for the actual future. Wow.
And yet let me tell you about the other end of that and why it's so important. So we do an event called Career Week for Girls. And so 3 weeks in June, we take different groups of girls to 5 different companies, 8:30 to 3:30. They really get to see what the company does, meet women and leaders there at the company, do interactive exercises, go on site visits. It's life changing, right? So I asked the girls at the end of the week, okay, what did you learn? And I had one 15-year-old look at me and say, Keller, it wasn't until this week that I knew that a woman could make a good living.
Oh,
Ugh.
Yeah,
Ugh.
yeah.
Wow. That's
Like
devastating.
I am where I need to be, doing what I need to do.
that's
And
right.
to see, it going from one extreme to the other. And it's because girls don't even know that they could be included in this industry. And when I ask them what they think their career will be, I mean, it's at one point in time, 50% of them were saying hairstylist or cosmetologist. Now, if you're watching the catwalk and you are thrilled and excited about that, I'll support you 500%.
Exactly.
If it's all you've seen a woman do, I'm not as happy.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so do you, and I mean, I would imagine that this lack of, or this narrow way of thinking about your career potential is correlated to sort of your economic situation or
Your education of your
education
parents or
level,
something.
or you can correct me.
Some, but not nearly as much as you would think. Because that's
Mm,
like immediately where you kind of go. But then I talk to all these girls, and one of our commitments is that the programs are free to every girl that wants to participate. And I've been told that what they equate our career week for girls to is like a summer camp that I've been told by parents it would have cost $2,000 to $10,000. And our commitment is that any girl can participate for free because I don't ever want economics to stand between our programs and them. But there are a couple of things that feed into those expectations for their careers. One is that between middle school and high school, girls' self-esteem goes down by 66%.
Starting
That's
at age 11, right?
Yes, regardless
Oh,
of their economic background, their geographic background, their
wow.
ethnic background. So then they go into high school, and one of the things, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when they are thinking about participating in class, they really want to be right. It's not an egotistical perspective, but if I'm going to raise my hand, I'm going to know that answer is right.
I'm not going to risk anything.
Yeah. And I ask guys anecdotally, I'm like, so how about you? And they're like, if I'm 50% sure, that hand's up, you
And what
know?
about raising your hand with a question? I don't know if I ever raised my hand to answer
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And and then so their participation becomes a little less. And so then what they think they can do is narrower. I will say that our industry hasn't been great about promoting itself because we sent the guys that we were retiring out to talk to a high school class. What's that got to do with,
Anybody?
10-year-old girl? I don't know. Um, and then another thing, once they have decided to enter the workforce, 10% of women that enter the workforce negotiate their first salary. 50% of men do. So then they start behind the curve for the rest of their career.
That,
All of those things feed into it. So it's not just their
this has been
economic
going
background.
on since people started looking at these data. I mean, that
Oh, yeah.
11-year-old thing, that losing Ophelia thing is,
I'm sorry, what did you say? Losing Ophelia?
I think there was a book called Losing Ophelia about the
Ah,
11-year-old
okay.
crisis that happens to girls between middle school and high school. And part of me wonders how much is cultural and how much you see in other cultures. And part of me thinks it's an interplay between estrogen and culture. Estrogen really, like, I know, but as a postmenopausal woman who takes estrogen cream sometimes, I notice that when I take too much, I start to get really sensitive and self-deprecating.
Yeah.
Like it just starts to happen. My husband will be like, "Did you take too much estrogen?" I'll be like, "I don't know, but do you think I'm fat?" And he'll be like, "Oh my God, stop the estrogen." It's like very
Not
clear.
the old, do these pants make me look fat?
So it's like, part of me thinks that's going on. I don't know.
You know, there are so many things going on. It's so I've been working on women's issues for a lifetime, but this has given me more insight into young girls than I've ever had.
Mm.
So, for instance, we had one 8-year-old girl who participated in,
Neat. Wow.
yeah, our transportation and construction girl day, we have girls as young as 6. And
Wow.
yeah, and I have had, someone tell me, well, Keller, big deal. I'm like, no, it is a big deal. We had a 9-year-old who participated and we interviewed her and her mother. Transportation and Construction Girl Day is just one day, 8:30 to 1:30. This past year, we had 1,700 girls from
Wow.
6 to 23. We had 70 different interactive exhibits. And this 9-year-old said, I I had no idea. And I can't believe that you can go somewhere for one day and you can go back home and your whole world is changed.
Wow.
That's 9. And her mother, we interviewed her too, and her mother was crying. She said, I had no idea. My daughter was so accepted. People welcomed her. And now she said, we'll drive down the road and she'll go, oh, I remember that company. We saw them at TCG Day. I could work there someday. And our mom goes, I know she's going to take a bigger place on the planet than she would have otherwise.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Well, one,
Huh.
Go ahead.
one, we need to, just yesterday, Julie and I were talking to a friend of ours who has a nonprofit called Girl Security, which is about promoting women, young girls' interest in national security careers. And I think the two of you would have a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think there needs to be a
love
joint
to.
little conference or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Love to.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I have so many thoughts. So I will defer to Julia because
Well,
I
I,
can't
I have many thoughts too. I just like I kind of don't where
I
so
don't
okay.
know.
I don't know
Let
where
me
the
tell you
conversation's gonna
about the
go.
8-year-old.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
go ahead.
8-year-old. And
Yes.
then we'll
I
go.
love this story. So we went to uh a flight simulator and a sophisticated one, not just a computer screen. And so this 8-year-old gets in this simulator. And the instructor, after she gets out, she's like a little jumping bean. She's so excited. And the instructor tells me, he says, well, I cannot believe that she just landed the plane upside down. And I said, give her a break. She's 8. Okay, so what if she crashed? He said, no, you don't understand. She landed it upside down, and I've never seen that happen before, ever. This guy'd been training people for years. And I can guarantee you that joy, that support, that confidence that 8-year-old got, she's going to be flying a plane. I have no
Of
doubt of
course
it
she is. Yeah.
because we supported her before she got to that other
Yeah.
time in her life.
Get them
Yeah.
before they decide they're bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so all right, I sort of want to look into the future, of
Okay.
course, and say, how could we build this into sort of the world for these kids? Like in every potential career, how could we have this be part of and just slinging it back to what you were saying before about you're not a real feminist unless you're a humanist. How
Yeah.
can we do it for boys too? Boys desperately need models of different ways of
Yeah.
being other than some sort of standard macho way. How can we do it for both of them? Like all genders, just
And
having
I totally agree with that and totally support that. And anytime anybody calls me and they're like, what about my son? What about, I have resources to give them and refer them to that. The only reason that we just focus on girls is that I have seen how important it is for them to have that space. When you see girls come to this event where we had 1,700 girls and they see all these girls, they see all this pink, they see themselves being welcome, they're like, I can't believe it. And I've even had girls say, and thank you for not having the boys because they're so rowdy. The other thing that girls are terrified of heavy equipment, and I could be talking a 4 foot tall skidster, right? Not anything huge, but they're terrified of it. And I can guarantee you that if boys were around, they'd be like, yeah, let's get on this. And the girls would stand back and they'd never get on it. And they tell me things like, well, I don't know if I can do it. I've never done it. I don't know how to do it. Oh, and my favorite, I might break it. I'm like, you're 80 pounds soaking wet. We got you on this. But they wouldn't do it if it wasn't just them. So that's why we focus on girls. But I absolutely believe that everybody should have those opportunities. And I will say that, um, one of the things I think that we say way too much that makes me want to slap people a little bit is anything is possible. Absolutely. But if you have only ever seen this,
Yeah.
you don't know this is even out there.
Yeah.
And so that, in my mind, is by far the biggest thing we need to do.
Yeah.
And I can only speak for my industry. In my industry, there's so much training that's available. It's just getting people to that training. And then, nobody's ever going to go and be a welder if they don't know that they could. And yet a welder can make $45 an hour.
Right.
I remember one carpenter telling me, she said, you know what, when I got divorced, it sucked. I'm not going to lie. But I never had to worry if I'd lose my house or if I could take care of my kids. And I want that financial freedom for every person, male or female.
Right.
That's so critical.
Yeah, I was gonna, ask the question that Julia asked about how do we make this available for everyone? And just to circle back to how you began your conversation about you will be a feminist when you are a humanist.
Mhm.
And I don't know that I have a question here. I have a comment from which I hope you will riff. But I've been concerned for years and years and years and years, decades probably now, about the loss of meaning in society.
Mhm.
The people are unanchored from so many customs, habits, institutions that provided meaning. And just before we got on, I was listening to a podcast. There's a new book called Goodbye Religion.
Hmm.
And it's a academic study of the growth of the nuns, NONES, no religious affiliation. And they made the point that it's interesting now, just in the last year or two, you're beginning to see this data that men are more interested in organized religion than women. This is like totally counter to centuries of trends. And the authors ascribe this to, as it said, this is like an indicator of this crisis of meaning
Mhm.
among young men that's for some reason does not exist in the same way among women. I'm reminded probably the first time I had this thought was when I saw the film The Full Monty. Do you remember The Full Monty?
Yes.
About a town in northern
Yeah.
England, the
Mhm.
collapse of whatever industry that had been,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
all the men were just unemployed and listless, and each one of their female partners had just gotten on with it,
Mhm.
figured out a job, keeping the family together, but the men were still nostalgic about a previous society where roles were better defined and their slot was like, easy to find.
Right.
And I do believe this is a severe issue for American society and many other societies, not just American. And so, I applaud and am myself part of many efforts to open up the horizons for women. But I recognize that these are having an unintended consequence.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of interesting to talk about that. And so I won't necessarily address the religion piece of it, but one of the things that I have really noticed, so we've been working on this for 8 years now, is that one of the biggest reasons, not the biggest, but there are several big reasons, but this is one of them that our program has been supported is fathers. I had one young man who had his first daughter, and his comment was, I support this because I want to make sure my daughter has a place at the table. So it's interesting to me that we have big support from men. It's not like I go out and it's just the women there that are supporting it. It's the men too. The other thing, sort of tangentially, I said that word wrong and that makes me angry.
I love that it makes you
Tangentially.
angry, but also that you admit it.
Well, I just got back from a tour in Egypt where our tour guide kept talking about things evoluting. And that is now my favorite word, evoluting. I love it.
So tangentially might be next.
Somebody has to make up the new words every year,
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
um, but one of the things that I see in this industry is that everybody, male or female, who drives by a building that they worked on, it's like, oh yeah, yeah, that's my building right there. This is what I did on that. There's such a sense of pride in it. Um, because they are really creating something really substantial. It's like,
Yeah.
I see what I've done. I know it's impacted people. Um,
Yeah.
so it's one of the industries that we're really fortunate in that because and I think that sense of pride in what you do is really critical to have you find a way to be grounded. But yeah, I see that all the time with both men and women. Yeah, that's my bridge right there. See that bridge? I did that. Yeah,
But
yeah,
see, that's kind of an example of how, I mean, maybe speaks to Carmen's observation or concern about meaning, because a lot of meaning seems to have been taken away when most of our world has become virtual. And if you could actually point to what you've done and it's like over there and you can go in it, or someone could go in it,
yeah,
that
yeah.
maybe has some kind of almost evolutionary impact. It feels almost physiological as opposed to something that kind of doesn't exist. Like if you write a piece of
Right.
software and
Yeah,
everyone's using Microsoft Word and you wrote Microsoft Word, but it also kind of doesn't, it's ethereal in a certain
right.
sense, and you kind of physiologically know that. I wonder if that's a difference. And then another difference, I think, is that women, girls, um, we always have this built-in meaning of like we know that we're the ones who can carry life. It doesn't mean we all have babies or anything, but we know that that somehow sort of evolution or God or whatever you want to call it has given us this kind of really special capacity. And so it's like even if you can't have children or you don't have children, you still kind of feel that culturally. And so then a career is like another, it's just like an additional thing. Whereas for men, it's like culturally, unfortunately, they've gotten the message that the career is who you are. Like that's like the father thing is secondary, right? Like it's the thing that really matters. Susan Faludi wrote this great book, Stiffed, about that after she wrote Backlash. And I think she's just right on that there's this, it's very much like the full Monty. There's this missing of when we just got to pursue, we were the ones who got to pursue this thing because this is all we really had, was this outside world stuff. And the family stuff wasn't as crucial or visible. I don't know. It's very complex, but it's so good to try to figure out because it kind of controls what happens next, right?
So Keller, has your career, other than, obviously your work in this nonprofit, but your career has been in construction or your personal
all.
career? No.
But that's so, along with learning about careers in this industry, we also spend a lot of time with the girls too about, I mean, that's why I know how much they can make in each career, because I will go and talk to schools and I'll say, hey, what career do you hope you'll have? And it's mixed gender groups that I talk to there. And they'll go fireman or police officer, doctor, ballerina. And I'm like, those are all great. What's your starting salary? Cricket, cricket. They have no idea.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm
Right.
like, at some point in time, unless you've got a permanent lease on your parents' basement, you've got to figure that out. So we spend a lot of time on that, on just general sort of work principles, because, they just don't necessarily get to embrace that. And we had one girl, I am getting back to what you had said. We had one girl who was 16, and she said, one of the things I learned was that I don't have to be just one thing for the next 40 years. And she said, at 16, that's pretty daunting because that's more than double my age. And I'm like, yeah, no, you start at one point and then you figure things out. I know one woman who was in her career for 40 years at one company, but she was in 10 different departments and jobs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I started out in journalism because I was fortunate to have one teacher, again, where one day makes a difference, right? Who, in one of my classes, she said, someday you're going to see what Keller's written. So I took journalism. That was it. That pointed my whole, and within that, I did marketing. And so marketing in under the journalism banner, which and then my minor in women's studies, that sort of, it's like I could do anything with that. And if you can communicate somehow, you can find a job.
Right.
So I was in newspaper and magazines, and then I worked for a financial institution. I worked for another nonprofit, and then that all took me up to the women's chamber. So yeah. It's been
Very
an
cool.
interesting, varied career.
Now, so this is definitely perhaps a little off topic and definitely kind of meta kind
Mhm.
of thing, but I've been I'm always thinking it's just horrible. And well, I really look enviously at people who don't ever seem to think. I mean, I don't know, but it
It's
just
sort
seems
of relaxing. It seems
it must
relaxing
it
to have
must
like a
be
break.
pleasant, it must be pleasant. So I this horrible United Healthcare
Oh,
Yeah.
assassination, and it got me to reflect. This is just kind of a new concept or idea that at least new to me, that entered my mind, that here we are in post or late stage capitalism, as they like to say, with all sorts of problems. It's all become about financial stuff. And people buy companies for no other reason than that they can figure out how to sell the parts.
Yeah, like flipping a house.
It's like flipping a house. And then we have government, which is where my career was. And government now is in this horrible position of, I'm just trying out this idea for size. I'm not like wedded to it or anything. But government now is in this horrible position of sweeping up after late stage capitalism, trying to paper over the contradictions as best they can, but kind of knowing that it's hopeless, right? And this won't last a long time. This tension cannot last. This will break.
Yeah.
And what made me think of it is that transportation and construction so far have escaped
Mm-hmm.
some of the obvious problems of late stage capitalism, there's a huge question mark associated with what I just said.
It doesn't have to break in the direction that like Marx talked about, right? Though it could break, it could go back. Like we've, right, this prediction that it has to break and then turn into like disaster only happens if we don't sort of notice and say, actually, what checks can we put on capitalism so it's not so extractive?
Marx didn't think the breaking was a disaster. Marx and Lenin thought that the breaking
Was the
what
next, right? But I guess what I'm saying is
would
it
be
doesn't,
the next wonderful synthesis.
right?
And
But it doesn't have to go like
they
it
didn't
doesn't.
understand human nature very well,
Yeah,
which was their
exactly.
basic problem.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Keller, any thoughts?
yeah.
Oh man, you just waded into the deep end of the pool.
I tend to do that.
Yeah, that's where we go.
Oh, you know, I think that we have a lot of issues that we need to work with. I think that I see a lot of hope in, like, I see these young women, and we will go to a concrete plant, and they'll go, I had no idea so much of it needed is actually recyclable. We test the water, and they're like, that's what we need to do. I mean, they are so in tune with how are we going to preserve our planet? How are we going to make things better? That gives me hope. Um, because yeah, when you're on the precipice, does going over it help?
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah. That's actually a wonderful point. Wonderful image metaphor
Yeah.
to play with. Which is really the better option, to keep teetering on the precipice or to
Pull
just
back.
go over?
Yeah, or to pull back and say, hey, maybe I don't want to stand on the precipice. What can we do to change it?
Yeah.
I can tell you don't like that option, but I think it's
No,
an option.
I'll tell you what I'm thinking. If only people were so rational
Uh,
and thoughtful. I mean, so I had a career at CIA and in the intelligence community, and I learned, a takeaway, perhaps not the truth, but a takeaway was that you really can't count on people making the best decisions, that there's just so many things that get in the way of that. And they're kind of natural, organic things like emotions, you know, just emotions.
But if it could be that the emotions line up with the best decision, that's kind of nice. Maybe there's a way that could happen.
you know, as someone who studied journalism, as somebody who really looked up to some of those individuals who were reporters and worked their way up through the industry. And um, I really miss that focus on, like, I remember when Time Magazine was a huge magazine and they
Yes, me
did
too.
in-depth stories on
Yeah.
things. People read them. I worked for magazines. I saw them go from, a real viable medium to now being online things. Um, and it really kind of breaks my heart that we're in a soundbite world now, that we're not digging down and reading and researching and really finding out what the truths of the matter are. I won't mention which stations they were, but for a couple of weeks, I had to stop them because then I started feeling like I was schizophrenic or something. But I listened to two different radio stations with vastly different opinions. And I was like, I'm just going to do this as a test. And I would listen to them report on the same events, and you could not tell it. It was like, I know you have different opinions, but wouldn't the same basic facts be the same? Not according to those reports. And I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
miss really reading and studying. Yeah. That's my lament for the day.
Well, that's really interesting, though, that you make that distinction between the reading and because there is something, again, sort of ethereal about all the online stuff that I think
Yeah.
encourages, even subconsciously, this idea that facts are malleable. You can't really know them. Um, they sort of don't, they're sort of not real. But when you're reading it and you can tell that the author, so this is a distinction now with AI, right? But when you can sort of tell that the author is telling a story that feels informed and with their own voice and with their uh, details that make sense to sort of what the human sensibility or something, like maybe it's also a cultural sensibility, probably is. It makes you feel like that's real. It's a bit like a building, right? The difference between a building and a piece of software. And I I wonder. I wonder if that's gonna go away as we have AIs read everything for us and tell us what's real, which seems like it's already gone, but
Do you use AI in construction?
That's such an interesting question that I have so many answers to.
Good.
Um, yes. What's been really interesting to me is to see how, for instance, I work with one small business that she has used AI to do a first read through on contracts.
Ah,
That's a great use for it because, small businesses now are getting, 200-page contracts. And if you miss one thing, you are in serious trouble. So she has used it to read through the first draft of the contracts and then also uses it to make sure that as they're going along, everything has been dotted, which sometimes the owners aren't so happy about because there were some things they were able to get away with in the past, right? Another company that's much bigger has used it to do the first draft of some of their training manuals. Again, a great use of it, right? And we had during Career Week for Girls, we had one of the companies that was using AI talk about it. And most people's assumptions are, oh, we're talking to these young girls. They're like, yeah, let's do AI right now. They were more hesitant about using AI than the
mm,
adults in the room, which certainly surprised me. And they were saying, there's some serious ethical things going on here, and how are we going to keep it? And one of them said, well, how are we putting parameters on it? And he said, it's too late for that.
right.
You know, you look at what happened with the internet. We are all, oh, we're going to put parameters on it. And he said that didn't happen. It's past that. What? Once the horse is out of the barn, yeah. So it's yeah, and then we have some people that are using it pretty irresponsibly, I would say. They're like just slam bam, there you go, and not really investing the people time in it to make sure it's correct. So it's all over the board, just like it is everywhere, right?
right.
Right. Yeah.
And eventually it'll like 30% to 50% of it will be used to serve porn, just like everything else. Actually, I have a question about that. Do the girls at this same age, is that when boys are starting to be more interested in porn, or maybe like do you think there's a relationship there?
I do not know about that at all. We certainly don't bring up that topic with the girls at all. Um, I do know that there's a lot of research that shows self-esteem and social interaction has been going down because of social media. One of the things that we do is that during Career Week for Girls, we say either leave your phone at home or you'll give it to us and we'll give it to you at the end of the day, but you cannot have it during the day.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, and it makes a huge difference in their experience, right? So but I'll never forget one time we were driving back. We'd gone on a site visit and we were running late. And so parents were coming to pick up their daughters, right? So I'm like, okay, we're going to give you back your phones early because we're late. We need to keep this covered. And we had one 15-year-old get her phone and look at it, and she had not had it since 8:30 that morning. It was now 3:30, right? I'm not a I'm not a math wizard, but I think that's 7 hours. She looks at her phone and says, "Oh my God, you don't know all the stuff I've missed." Like,
Oh my goodness.
wow, wow. Yeah. And so the minute they got them back, they're like all over them. I'm like, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So what's next for your you know effort for your where do you want to go next, or do you have a next, or does it not matter?
I totally have a next. I want to take this nationally, and that takes money, and I refuse to do it with bake sales. That's
Aha.
my
You're not going to lady price this. I like it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Because again, our goals with our program is to make sure that girls have access to economic sustainability and rewarding careers. Every girl, every boy deserves that. And we need to make that happen.
Yeah.
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 Very
Amen.
cool.
Very cool. Thank you for your work.
So let me just go back to the foundation, Hoya,
Uh-huh.
and the Hopi founder or
The
CEO or
chairperson of the Hoya Foundation is
of
Hope.
the
Yeah.
and what is its vision, or what is its objective?
So the vision of the Hoya Foundation, it really started with an emphasis on supporting minorities and women.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it has kept to. We do some portions where we're doing the coaching and the training for women and minority owned companies. And then we've done this program. It's really to focus on that. You know, he and I bring two different perspectives of that, of really wanting to make sure opportunities and support exist for those parts of our community that haven't necessarily always gotten.
Yeah, very good.
We'll put a link to the foundation in the
Well, I'm
show
going to go
notes.
research the Hopis now and
Yeah.
learn more about their traditions
I want
and
to learn more about this land
insight.
working. I want to learn about working with the land. I mean, this idea, Carmen, of planting the corn where it's going to grow
Right.
instead of making it grow where you want it to grow because it's convenient for your
Right.
tractor. I mean,
Right.
how
Well,
does that change the brains of anyone who lives in that culture? It feels like it's like you're searching for the way things naturally go, and then you're planning according to that rather than sort of forcing things. Like, how does that change a culture? That's kind of amazing.
I can tell you a funny story, and I will try to leave out the details to not offend anyone. But the founder's uncle was an elder in the Hopi tribe, and they had someone visit from another country that was very desert oriented. And so they had lunch, and one of the things this other country wanted to learn, they said, "So tell us, because the land that you have here is very similar to ours, and yet you're able to raise crops. But what do you do when you don't have rain that season? What's your plan B?" And his uncle looked at him and said, "We don't have a plan B." He said, "Well," the other guy said, I understand that, but we're just kind of want to look at it. And oh, I did forget to say this is a very religious country. But we just wanted to really look at that and go, okay, if this season it's not working out, what do you do? And his uncle looked at him and said, "You got to be right with God." And everybody went,
mm,
but I think that, in looking at where I grew up, where there's all these cornfields, these big square ones, it feels like to me, and I'm just saying this of my own accord, nobody has told me this from the tribe or anything, but it feels to me like a respect and a reverence for the land and what it wants to give and working with it, rather
Right.
than forcing your views and your opinions and your way of growing on it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, they have orchards there. Orchards. How do you grow an orchard in a desert?
Yep.
You got to be right with God.
Yep.
Yeah,
Got to be right with the flow.
totally.
Yeah.
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 Well, this has all been a revelation to me.
Oh,
I enjoyed it very much.
Me too. Thanks
well,
for being
I would rather be a revelation than an evoluting.
tangentially.
Tangentially.
Also, I think you could be both.